Hi everyone, welcome back to another new episode of Discovering Art Together. Today we are going to dive deeper into Art Nouveau. So we're going to learn the color palette of Art Nouveau and why exactly did the artists use the colors they did in that era, but not only taking a look at just the color palette, we're also going to compare it to other art movements that also drew inspiration from nature, just to see if there is some relation or if there's a difference between the two styles and why they use these particular colors. A super awesome person commented on one of my videos the other day on, is Art Nouveau new? And you can check that video out over here. I'll link it right above over here so you can learn a little bit more about what is Art Nouveau and a little bit of the awesome artists that are from this era, so you'll get a better understanding of what we're going to talk about today. And that question is, could you speak to the color palette of Art Nouveau, especially in comparison to other ideas that also drew from nature, like Hyperrealism? Always of two minds that it was more working with materials that were readily available than a conscious choice. Okay, great question. Thank you so much for commenting that, and I'll be more than happy to discover, explore a little bit, and do some research just to see what can we discover together. So just to simplify the questions in there, we have two main questions. The first question is whether if we can discover a little bit more about the color palette and why did the artists from Art Nouveau use those specific colors, and in comparison to other styles like Hyperrealism, I also added another few art movements. I added realism as well, and I also did add Romanticism because they also do have some correlations with nature, so we'll discover and see what we can find out. The second question, if I understood clearly, if it's not what you meant, please do comment below. Again, I'll be more than happy to answer the correct question because wasn't super clear though, but I kind of got a rough idea of it. So basically you're asking whether if the artist from Art Nouveau used whatever they had at the moment, that whatever was available for art materials, or is it because they chose those specific colors because they had that in mind? So it was more of a choice rather than just whatever they had available and they just had to use it. Let's go and take a look at Mucha's art because he is the most well-renowned artist back in the Art Nouveau era, and he's got awesome, great examples for what we are looking for today. So, the limited color palette is one of the very first thing that I've noticed in the color palette for Art Nouveau. So, using just a few main colors to keep it simple and not overcomplicating things. The other thing that I did notice about Art Nouveau's art color palette is also flat colors. So what Art Nouveau artists did is that keeping it simple with the colors, not only just having a limited color palette, they also flattened out the color. So basically they put in a lot more detail into the line drawing and details of the design. So they prioritize shape and form over color, but at the same time, it does not mean that they did not pay attention to color. They did have something in mind so that the colors would not exactly clash and compete with the designs that they wanted to share, and also have the most important role and making that the most attracting thing in the drawing and painting. So now that we know that they used limited color palette and also flattened colors for majority of their compositions, and mostly Mucha, we're going to take a look and see what exactly is the color harmony they used on the color wheel. So for example, Mucha's, he used complementary colors. As you can see, he did not use more than 2, probably max 3 different colors in most of his artworks and illustrations, and it keeps it really unified. It's not too much, it's just the right amount of colors. And not only did he use complementary colors, which is basically the opposite color of the color wheel, we also have split complementary. So what split complementary colors is, basically you have, instead of the exact opposite colors of the color wheel, they kind of split into the side colors a little bit. So it kind of creates a little bit of like a Y shape, or kind of like a skinny triangular shape on the color wheel. One great aspect about split complementary is that it muted the colors so that it can pop out more of the other vibrant colors that it was complementing. So he picked what he wanted to pop out to have a more importance in the color composition, where the more natural and muted colors would be a kind of a supporting color for the main color. So using neutral colors naturally makes it feel a lot more natural, and then also just we tend to be a lot more attracted to warmer colors as well than muted colors and neutral colors. But wait, there's actually more. If we take a look at Gustav Klimt's paintings and artworks, he also used very neutral and very close to earth tone colors and not super bright colors. Like definitely the yellow is very warm, very happy, but at the same time it's not like that kind of like super bright yellow. It's not like Pikachu yellow, you know, it's like super happy, super bright, not the smiley face type of yellow, but neutralizing the color makes it closer to nature. It resembles something that's a lot more real, more natural, and that's why we don't want to use too much like intense colors, because intense colors also means creating more contrast if they were to be compared with other tones and colors in the artwork, and that would actually make it really noisy and not as gentle, not as tranquil and calm. So next, let's jump into and see what the difference are between other art movements that also have ideas that were inspired by nature, and see if they have some kind of resemblance to Art Nouveau. So let's take a look at Hyperrealism first. So what I've discovered after comparing a few different paintings and artworks from Hyperrealism versus Art Nouveau, the first thing that I found is lots of the colors are not simplified, since when you're painting Hyperrealism, it's really high in detail, so when you make it look a lot more realistic, we do have a wider range of different colors, value tones, and so on, right? So it's not as simplified as it is compared to Art Nouveau, which is more limited color palette, not as much variety of colors, and then you would also have flat coloring, which also kind of makes it even more simplified so that we can concentrate on the design and the shapes and the forms in Art Nouveau art. Those are one of the main things that I've discovered, and definitely it really depends on the artist too. So some people, if they painted Hyperrealism, they might pick something that's closer to nature, and that would have a closer color palette to Art Nouveau though. But the main thing we want to keep in mind is that the difference is more simplified color for Art Nouveau and more detailed, not as simplified for Hyperrealism. Okay, next we're going to take a look at realism versus Art Nouveau and see what we can find out about those two. This is what I found out about realism compared to Art Nouveau is the neutral and color is a lot more muted since it resembles a lot more about real life. So the natural colors are not flat. They fade a lot into neutral, so they don't really keep their hue. And what I mean by hue is that hue is basically like the colors, whether it's like green, orange, yellow, blue, red, whatever, right? And in realism, in real life, we don't have as much of these like pure, intense, and really high chromatic colors. So when the realism artists painted, they stayed true to what they saw. So definitely the contrast is a lot higher with the lighting. So what happens with that is a lot of the colors would categorize them and add a little bit more shade to it, or having a lot more light to it. So it would kind of wash it out a little bit, so it's not as pure as it is. Where in Art Nouveau, you still see what color it is. The color is still present in the artwork. You can definitely see, okay, this is orange. Even if it's a little bit muted, but you can definitely see that, okay, this is orange with blue, or orange with a little bit of green and other colors beside it, purple, right? So we can definitely see what exact color it is, while when you're looking at realism, it's they kind of like faded it out so that it's not a distinct color that we can categorize it into. So as you can see, realism and hyperrealism versus Art Nouveau are quite similar, but I really wanted to show you how Romanticism has a slight different approach and difference between Art Nouveau and it. And definitely we're going to see something really interesting, because a lot of these other art movements, they don't exactly use the color as the main subject or the main character in the play or the painting. They use the colors to tell and make something else a lot more important. So Romanticism's color palette is a lot more dramatical in lighting. So bigger contrast, more intense colors, but intense colors in lights and darks. So Romanticism has like that, it still has that old Baroque feel to it a little bit, because of the dramatical contrast of the lighting in it. And when you have dramatical contrast, you lose a lot of the middle colors and all that stuff, and it breaks down into a lot of variety of different tones, and it's not just like a simple straight out color that you would see in Art Nouveau. The other really interesting thing about Romanticism is that since the contrast is so dramatical and intense, it gives us a very different feeling. So if you were to look at Romanticism, they use nature in a different way. They emphasize the nature though, but they don't kind of get the mellow and tranquility of nature. They kind of turned it into something else, compared to Art Nouveau, where they actually went back to nature and used nature as their main subject, and that's why they really focused and really appreciates the subtle color tones, the more calmer color tones, and that's why they chose more muted colors, not as intense colors, and also just simplifying it so that it's a little bit more obvious for us to see when we look at the illustrations and artworks from Art Nouveau. So definitely it really would depend on whether if the artist chose something that's more closer to nature and why they picked these particular colors, most likely because they wanted to express a specific feeling. So as you kind of see the other art movements compared to Art Nouveau, they use the color palette in order to express something beyond just the color, where I believe Art Nouveau made the color a life of its own. Like, it has a very big role in a lot of the artworks in Art Nouveau, and then they take a lot of attention and make it really important instead of having it support another idea or a kind of expression, right? Because they really specifically picked these colors by choice. I don't think Art Nouveau chose it just because those were the only colors that they had available. Because if you think about it, there's so many different colors back in that time, and I believe they do have a lot more choices of actually even just using and mixing the primary colors. Only you can get a lot of really nice vibrant colors though, but they chose to mute it out so that they can have that natural look to it, more earth tones, more muted tones. It's not so intense in color, not super bright. So if you guys like this video and learning more about the color palette of Art Nouveau in comparison to other art movements and seeing if they had like a relation to one another, you might like this video over here where I talk about color psychology. You get to learn more about the colors and how colors express specific feelings and emotions. Or you can check out this video over here where you can learn more about Art Nouveau and the awesome artists from this time and era. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and have fun. Stay creative.